Hello, I'm Lorenzo Marchese of the Geek Authority, and I wanted to quickly thank you for watching the show you're about to see. I also want to make sure that you know it's very important to me that you subscribe to this channel, as well as click on that little bell that sends notices when new shows are dropped. If you would like to help support the Geek Authority, you can go to patreon.com, where you can help keep new shows coming by donating whatever you can. Thank you again so much for subscribing and supporting the Geek Authority. Now, enjoy the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Geek Authority's Making Entertainment. This is a show where I go behind the scenes and talk to cast and crew from various productions that have things either going on or going to open or have opened, and you want to learn about how they're produced. This particular show is about a one-woman show starring Anna up there called Where Do We Go From Here? And in a previous show, I got to interview her about her thoughts and psychology of making it and writing the songs and so on and so forth. But this show is how it's being brought back to the stage once again, thanks to Bryan Rasmusasn and Menzies. Sorry, Rod Menzies. There you go. I can edit that. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to the show. Real quick, why don't you introduce yourself and your part in this Where Do We Go From Here stage production? Anna?
Hi, I'm Anna Guigui, and I'm the writer, actress, singer, piano player, all that stuff of the show.
So you're a composer.
Composer, you would say?
I would throw composer in there. Yeah.
I think yes. Songwriting.
You're everything on stage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Rod?
And I'm Rod Menzies, and I had the good fortune to direct the show.
Okay. Was it an easy experience for you?
It was very easy because Anna is so talented. But it had its the challenge is that Anna also has very high standards. So you know that you want to make everything that she does look the best you possibly can. So it was hard to the degree that you wanted to see if you could make it better. How can we make it better? Which is what we always do.
Wow. And Bryan Rasmusasn, what's your part?
I'm the producing artistic director of the White Fire and producer of Solo Fest and all that stuff. So that's my thing. Jack of all trades. You got to do a lot of stuff like Anna.
Right. So, Bryan, how did you get introduced to this project? What was your first introduction?
Actually, I hosted Anna's previous solo show at the White Fire, probably a decade ago, maybe. Yeah. And of course, we keep in touch, and I'm friends with her family and things like that. So she's back east, but I thought, I keep in touch with her as far as on social media and stuff. And I saw that she was doing a pandemic project, and it's right up our alley and all that great stuff. So I contacted her and tried to make it all work, and she had a lot of logistical challenges with her piano, and we had a case that looked like a grand piano that could be fit over her keyboard, and the sound and all that stuff. So the cool thing about it is that we were able to do something we hadn't done before, which is use two cameras to be able to have different angles and stuff. So it was a little bit of a challenge for what we were normally doing, but it was great because we were able to expand our ability, and we're doing what we did with her show now for all of the shows. So it gives us a little bit more control over the quality, the picture quality and the sound quality. And for a musical like this, solo musical or any musical, the real challenge is sound. You just want it to be as good as possible. Just like in film, you want the picture to be as pristine as possible. And so that's been our entire goal throughout this, is to get the clarity and the quality as high as possible, because that is part of the challenge with theater people accepting cameras in in the space in theater. It's kind of resisted and has been forever. And I certainly ran into that when we started, tinkering with it. We've actually been doing some sort of form of live streaming for a decade. We did our first live stream back in 2011 with a play called Firehouse that we did, but it had a lot more equipment, trucks, cable. The technology wasn't nearly as advanced as it is now, but I had a real interest in what it could do. And since Los Angeles is a hybrid venue type of situation where everybody's already done their theater in New York or Chicago or Portland or whatever, and they come to Los Angeles to work in film and television for the most part, but still want to do theater. So theater in Los Angeles has grown enormously, and not long ago we had more professional productions in Los Angeles than New York. And so it advanced the reputation of Los Angeles theater, and started, growing. And so when I started to figure out how the live stream situation could happen, it became, a real challenge. But the technology of all of that seemed to come together right at the right time. And so a couple of years ago, we started to step it up, and we had shot 40 live streams of last year's Solo Fest prior to when everything shut down. So we had already gotten a lot of the kinks out and paywalls and all that stuff, platform and everything that is
The one thing I wanted to key on real quick is you had mentioned that there was a resistance. Is that from the actors?
From
the cameras?
Just from theater people, not from necessarily audiences, but theater's a pure form that has been, around clearly for thousands of years. But there's something about it that I have found. It's the same reason that film departments and theater departments don't work together in colleges and universities. It's so bizarre and unfortunate. And the business is kind of like that. I mean, the truth is that the film and television business should be supporting theater and helping to fund it and helping to create new works and
right. I absolutely agree with that, because when I was going to film school, our pool of actors came from the theater. So
yeah, I mean, we not for us. And I went to some of the top places, and all of them are like that. There's something about theater that people are very hesitant to bring in cameras into, because it's supposed to be in the moment, supposed to be live, and not recorded necessarily. But as we just experienced with the pandemic and something like Hamilton that came out, people realized that it could be done well and theatrically. We're not trying to create live film and TV. We're shooting theater. And so the challenge was to shoot live theater theatrically. And right. That's an interesting challenge. And it was a great challenge. And I was in awe of the ability for the solo artists to connect with their audience through the camera, instead of just recording a live performance where it's usually shot from both sides of the auditorium, and right. Then you edit back and forth. And so you're kind of at an angle, and you also see heads of audience and stuff in it. And a lot of times it's washed out, and it's not really lit for for camera. Now we had to come in and redo that whole thing and light it for camera and do all that stuff. So right. That's some of the stuff that we dealt with. So it was interesting, because I think people finally understood, because we were forced to realize that there is room for camera in theater, and if it's done right and shot well, and especially with solo. So with a play, we don't have steady cams like in Hamilton, where they're behind the other actor and they can shoot the other actor, and that's a little bit of a challenge for sure. But again, right. And it's a play.
The other thing too, I noticed too, especially with this one, and where do we go from here? Anna, when she performs it, it's very personal. It kind of brings you in. I mean, it's like an intimate performance just for you, even though it's on camera and she's on stage and everything. And we'll get back to there's a couple technical questions I have, but I want to jump to Anna real quick. Anna, do you remember the call from Bryan when he said, "Hey, do you want to do this?"
Here? Yes. So I submitted an application online, so that everybody, you can submit on the Whitefire Theater site. They accept applications for solo shows. And Bryan, you can enlighten us when, how often those submissions happen. But that solo show festival, I believe, happens once a year, right? The initial one that we did. And so this was the 10th anniversary, correct, Bryan, this year?
Yes.
So I submitted a snippet of my show, an explanation of what it was, and then Bryan responded and said, "We'd love to have you." And so I was so excited because it was COVID quarantine and I hadn't performed in months, but I had been writing nonstop. The muse was with me, Rod, right? When I reached out to you, I said, "I can't stop writing these songs." They're pouring out of me. And I was taking a solo writing class with Terry Silverman. She's been a very supportive facilitator and resource for a lot of people during COVID. We took writing classes with her, and I had been writing solo shows with her for 20 years. So the songs just kept flowing out of me, and she said, "I think you have a musical here." So it just flowed. The songs drove the show, and the story unfolded of my experience during quarantine, the good and the bad. And it touches on various topics, as you know. But the live stream aspect was exciting for Rod and I. And Rod, I'm going to ask you about this in a second, about what you do, because this has so much to do with how we came across. And what you pointed out, Lorenzo, was that what we did is we created kind of a Zoom set live. So like I was in a theater, and this has happened. A lot of my friends that saw it were like, "Were you at home?" I said, "No, I recreated." They did. I'm like, "No, I flew out to LA during quarantine." I had someone create this mural. Frank Strasser did the design behind me to emulate my home overlooking the Mystic River here in Chelsea, Mass. And then we did a Zoom set. Rod and I talked about this, and he said, "Well, you did this during, it was Zoom, and it would be most effective." So, and Rod directs, I mean, you can explain what you do, Rod, at UCLA, because this is your thing. And we had to embrace the video medium, and it worked. It was thrilling to see how this came across the camera, and people it's an intimate medium,
That's exactly what I said. So Rod, how did you get involved? Would you meet Anna first, or did Bryan bring you in, or how did that happen?
I had worked with Anna before on a show called Anna versus the World. You can guess the outcome of that match. Anna won. And that was done down at Beyond Baroque. That was another show that was developed with Terry Silverman in her solo show workshops. I think Anna got to me because there were other people in that class who had worked with me as a director. And so she called me up and we talked, and we liked each other and said, "Let's do it." So we already had a good connection from working on that show together. When Anna called me about this one, I immediately said yes, without even looking at the script, because I knew I was going to enjoy it. I knew it was going to be good. And I also registered that there was going to be, like what Bryan was talking about, there was going to be problem solving in this new medium. When Anna and I worked together before, there was a live theater solo show. Well, we all know how to do that, but how are we going to do this virtual version? And that was very intriguing to me. And since the pandemic, we've all been forced into this, just as Bryan was talking about. I've been, I'm a theater director, and well, I've been directing virtual performances and figuring out how cameras work and figuring out how much post you need to do. And, so it was just, it was kismet that all this stuff happened kind of at the time when the technology was ready to go.
So as a director, was it you who decided where the camera was positioned, and then in the editing process, what was cut, or was that Bryan, or how did that work?
Well, we had a very fast turnaround on this thing, and it was a little bit of inventing the wheel, but we were working with a really talented DP, I guess you would say, in film terms. Bryan's crew was there with the cameras and the sound. So we were capturing. I had input on where the cameras would go. We talked about lighting. We talked about sound. We did quite a bit of, setup checking and so on. But really, ultimately, we shot run-throughs, and then we relied on the editing in post to get to the final cut. And I got to make some notes on that. But it was a very fast turnaround. It's about 3 days, wasn't it, Bryan?
Yes, for this one.
Yeah.
Wow.
We got down to 1 day.
Is that average, Bryan? Yeah. 3 days, or does it take longer?
No, it just takes 1 day to do what we normally do, but with Anne's, because we had 2 cameras. So it needed a little bit more post work done. So we were willing to do that because we wanted to see how it worked and how it looked, and having the two cameras and being able to switch back and forth. In streaming, especially live streaming, there is a piece of equipment called a switcher, and it's the piece of equipment that switches the cameras in live time. And my particular setup has the ability to do that to multiple platforms at the same time. So even though we don't do that, it has that ability, and so it makes it much more available. And without needing this big equipment, just the switcher is a fair amount of money, both to rent and of course to own. But we've realized with technology changing so fast that owning just doesn't seem to work, except if you're getting a smaller camera and situation. But I mean, it changes all the time, and there's already been an upgrade to my live stream camera that we've taken and done, just with technology the way it is, it just keeps getting better and better and better. And so we want to keep on the edge of the technology to make sure that we're doing the best stuff that we can. So with a limited budget. I mean, we're not a film production company by any stretch of the imagination, and it's theater. So, very little, if any, budget at all. So it's all about creativity and figuring stuff out as you go. And that's one of the really great parts that came out of this whole thing, was just learning and growing at the same time you're dealing with these challenges and everything. And so it ended up being quite an extraordinary process ultimately.
If I can say, Bryan, you're one of the few. I mean, the Whitefire, I don't know where else they were doing this during pandemic. This was a unique situation. And so, I mean, I flew out across the country to do this because I thought I have to perform live in the theater. Like, I have to. And Bryan provided that platform. You had Brandon, was it Brandon Lesser who was doing the camera? Was it? Oh, Gozer. And then you had a lighting person who was phenomenal.
Derek,
that made all, you understand, the lighting is what, both were so integral. And then we had Nancy also assisting us. Like, everybody was a team. It was such a collaborative effort, during this time. So yes, Bryan, thank you.
Yeah,
wow.
Absolutely.
For everything you did. It was a huge effort. I mean, this was like we didn't know. We were troubleshooting kind of in the moment, and like, this is going to work. And then, because my show was driven by music, it was really important that the sound quality be very high. And they really supported that. I mean, with the sound. Go ahead. Yes, Lorenzo.
No. I got to find out. So you're writing this show. You're vomiting talent and music and lyrics and all this other stuff. And then you get Rod there to come in and kind of holistically make it a show, quote unquote. So did you guys did Bryan see the final version of what actually was done, or did it still require tweaking when you got to the Whitefire Theater? Was that still part of the process? Not the technical, just the story and the show itself.
So Rod and I rehearsed every night, Rod, on Zoom. We had 30 days I was in LA, renting a little guest house, and we would rehearse every night or meet every day to talk through the script, because I had written everything, but we hadn't rehearsed anything. So we spent, every day we could. And then at night I would do I started doing run throughs. So by the time we got to Bryan, Bryan hadn't really seen the end product until we got into the theater. But in the theater, things changed because of the setup and the backdrop and the lighting. And then we had to set everything. It takes hours, right? And then we took 2 or 3 takes. It was 2 takes all the way through. But it's really, it's so different from performing live. I know that animal, but then looking where I had to look, and then I had to deal with the sound and the coordination of the songs with the emotion and like the characters. And so, I don't know, Lorenzo, does that make sense now?
Absolutely. You said you did 2 live recordings. So
we captured back to back. It was a live stream in the theater.
Right. Are they edited together, or is it just one of the 2 that we see?
One take, each take. It's separate.
Right. But when we saw it was just one take or a combination?
Combination,
because it was 2 cameras.
Right. Okay. Cool. So Bryan, you mentioned earlier about the piano. She told me during her interview, and I was blown away because it looked like a grand piano.
Yeah, it looked amazing.
How did that work? Who came up with that idea, and how did you make it?
So I rented, I did dueling pianos for 20 years, and that's how we do dueling pianos. Is we have an electronic keyboard in the encasement of what looks like a piano shell. They're called shells. And so a friend of mine had that, so we rented it from him, and he came with a friend, Steve, set it up for us and put the whole thing together. Remember Bryan? And he was amazing.
Oh, I remember. Yes, yes.
So
yes.
lovely. So that's how that worked. Yeah, it's from my past experience. It's like all these things coming together, all these elements from my experiences of how to make that work,
Right.
and then Bryan going, yes, that's going to be the way to do it. And it looked like a real piano from
Right.
the end
Was
that
it
we did
88
it.
keys? Did it have 88 keys?
Oh, it was a keyboard. No, was it an 88 keyboard?
It was a full keyboard.
Was it a full keyboard? It was huge. It was
Full
big.
keyboard.
All right, it was 88. So
With a baby grand shell on it. On
Right.
top. It looked real. It was amazing. It looked incredible.
So-
So we've had both grand pianos and baby grands in the Whitefire for the LA Modern Jazz Festival that we used to host, and some various other concerts and stuff like that. So, and when she brought it in, it looked just like when we had the real ones in there. So it was a fantastic piece of theatricality, and it was magic. It looked great.
Yeah.
if I can give a plug to Ryan Buter, because Ryan Buter and Steve Haas were responsible for that, I have to give him a plug because he does dueling pianos, and that was the only way we got that done. So thank you, Bryan. Yes.
Like I told you, Anna, when I watched you do it, it was like I thought you were on a grand piano, and it sounded like you were on piano, and I'm
Right?
like,
It's such an illusion. We're creating a theatrical illusion on camera.
So Rod, were you? I mean, obviously she's playing to her music and singing her songs. Did you have to direct her playing visually, or just naturally do what she does? I mean, as far as
No. Well, I don't know if you've ever seen dueling pianos, Lawrence, but the Anna can play piano in her sleep. She is extraordinarily gifted, and she can tell stories while she's playing the piano. You've seen the show, I think. She sings beautifully. It's like the piano is an extension of her. She has there's no disruption between the two. So there's no way I can direct that. I just let Anna do what she does natively with great talent and ability. I'd say that other than looking through the camera lens to see that we had a good shot, and we, as Anna said, we rehearsed night after night after night. So there were many layers of notes and discussions and considerations. But it's really more of a sort of collaboration. In this kind of situation, I'm kind of playing the role of the audience, and I'm watching the performer, and I'm just sort of dialoguing about my responses to what I'm seeing. Anna doesn't really need direction in the sense that she doesn't know what she's doing.
wow.
Well, Rod did direct, though. I mean, he really had a concept and a vision of like how to bring things across. And then, in terms of who I'm singing to or speaking to in each song and monologue, I mean, you really helped hone all that together, because I came with the piece, but it hadn't been streamlined at that point when we started that month. So
Right.
everything came together pretty fast.
It's charmingly funny. It's poignant. There's a lot of moments. I mean, I told you after I watched it myself, I was humming. What was that song? Always humming.
Zoom, 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 zoom. My nephew can't stop singing it. It's so funny. Thank you.
That was very, very good. So overall, what would you think? And this can come from anybody, in terms of people watching this and thinking about doing one woman, one man shows. Are they hard conceptually to bring about on stage? I mean, Bryan, you've got the whole technical producing end, and obviously Rod, when you're directing a one person versus a cast, and then of course Anna as the performer. What would you say to people out there that thinking about it?
Well, I mean, I've done now over probably 1,000 solo shows at the Whitefire since I've been as an artistic director there. And how that all came about was because I've done a solo show myself of Van Gogh back in the 90s. And so I did that for about 10 years and really learned the challenges of solo presentation. And it's the hardest thing an actor will ever have to do, by far. Hamlet doesn't even have an hour and 20-minute monologue. So it's a very, very difficult thing. And I wanted to create kind of a safe harbor for soloists to develop their work and to mount it, because it's incredibly expensive, and it's usually you lose 3/4 of your budget in a solo. So I spent years trying to figure out a better way to produce solo work. And that's how I came up with Solo Fest a decade ago, was that exact reason. Because solo shows are usually on someone else's set, with someone else's lights, you know, and all that kind of stuff. We get kind of the raw end of the deal a lot of times, because it's incredibly expensive to mount in the old format of 3 shows a week, 6 weeks is kind of the normal show run for a play or a musical. But solo shows, because of the numbers, there's only one person in the cast, and unless they have a name of some kind, like mine was Van Gogh, so that helped a lot. But now solo work has developed more into personal journeys rather than creations of old characters or things like that, like mine, a historical. They're still done, but now it's become, I think, the purest form of storytelling in theater, because it's still a story, and we're creating it in our heads as far as all the images and stuff with some tech, but it's really still a storytelling medium. And
I've seen several of your productions there at Whitefire that are even culturally kind of uplifting and informative in terms of different cultures, telling their stories.
It's an important thing. Yeah.
Wow.
But I also, because of that, there's just a need for support for soloists and stuff. So that's what, I wanted to make sure we could do. It's one of those challenges that with solo work, there's not a whole market for it. There's not a place for it to go. So I've been creating that at the Whitefire with pay-per-views on our page and things like that. So after they stream their shows, they can still have their show available to watch and have income from that. I'm working right now with a major corporation to get them solo work on their platforms that supply databases to colleges and universities around the world. Wow. And because of the type of subject matter that a lot of these are, it's really great for college audiences. And last year I developed and created the Black Voices Solo Festival, which is the first Black solo festival in the United States, which is hard to believe. I was shocked when I did my research to find out that there wasn't any. There's a African solo theater and art festival up in Oakland called Solo Afro, or Afro Solo, I think. And but no just Black festival around the country. And this was right after the George Floyd situation. So again, artists can only seemingly protest and have a voice through their work and through their art. So that's what I wanted to do, is try and create something that could do something to help the Black community. And me being about as white as you can get, certainly was something that I had to walk in with much respect and much delicacy as I could with their journeys and their challenges. And it was incredibly supportive and incredibly inspiring to listen to these artists have their voices. And we're about ready to go into the second annual one here in September as well. We're always been a diverse theater, and we always want to bring BIPOC artists to the forefront if possible at all in all of our shows. As you know, the Billie Holiday show, as I've directed, it's in its 12th year of running at the Whitefire. And the estate just saw it last year and is interested in being a part of that. So, it's exciting, and it's great because artists like Anna can get exposure and can get her work seen, and in this case, worldwide. A lot of solo shows this year have been able to broadcast places like Australia, and Poland, and London, and all kinds of stuff all around the world. And it's fantastic to be able to share theater, live theater, globally. And that's what we're really interested in. And we're continuing to do that, even though we're going to have live audiences back in the theater. So
wow.
That's how I kind of got into the whole solo thing, was because I've been a solo artist myself, and it's important to know their path and to understand it. And as an actor myself, it was incredibly challenging, and it's been a real and frankly, solos again came to save the theater by being the only safe medium that you could do in the quarantine time. And so that's why we were able to do what we did and do it safely. We shot 150 solo shows, knock on wood, with no illness or any infections of any kind. And so we were really, really stressed out about that, because if just one person got sick, they would ruin everything. So the stress of that, along with the stress of almost losing the theater and the stress of just getting it, was incredibly stressful during this whole time. But when things like this show happen, it just makes it all worth it. And it's quite an extraordinary thing to witness. So I'm really proud.
And this is the kind of show that everybody wants to come back to and see, because it's positive, it's high spirited, and like everyone has said here, and I've seen her too, she's incredibly talented and funny and charming and beautiful. Okay. All right. Love Fest. I love Fest.
Thank you, Lorenzo.
So Rod, okay. So the people out there want to do, say they want to direct these. They don't necessarily want to be the actors, although haven't met a lot of directors who haven't been actors or done acting. What kind of words of wisdom would you share on that?
Directing solo shows? Well, Bryan, I think, was right. It's extremely challenging, probably the most challenging thing for an actor to do. But it's also very empowering and transformative, because especially if you're dealing in personal narratives, you'll re-identify by the time you've completed a solo show. You'll understand yourself differently, because it's just that deep of a journey. So if you're going to direct a solo show, you have to be interested in that kind of transformative process. It's not just, here's a script, let's direct it. But here's a writer-performer, let's figure out how to be a reflecting service and a guide, so that this transformative journey can be fruitful and powerful. Because this is also something about the solo show format. I think they're incredibly powerful because it's so personal. A lot of my teaching and coaching work is in the field of voice and speech. And I've always thought that a solo show was kind of the apotheosis of voice and speech work. It's the big culmination of everything to do with having a voice.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm curious, when you mentioned about directing and formulating, can you remember a moment when you made a suggestion or gave direction for Anna in this particular production, where it kind of changed gave it, I don't know, an extra kick, or more visceral kind of feeling to it? Any particular?
I think that happened pretty regularly, actually. Because I think that's the creative process, the creative journey. I think when the one that Anna referred to not too long ago was really specifying who is the other that this particular text is speaking to. Who is the person who most must listen to what you're saying now? And getting the other, because that's the weird thing about being a solo performer. There's nobody there listening, but I believe every amount of dialogue is actually addressed to somebody. So if you can identify in your imagination, I'm saying this to my mother, I'm saying this to my father, I'm saying this to my sweetheart, then it becomes more specific and more powerful. And it also helps clarify in you, why am I telling this story? So that's probably a lot of the mojo that I was throwing into this process.
Right. And the music, was that easier to deal with, or just another layer to it?
The music was easier to deal with because the songs were crafted by Anna herself within her own sensibility as a composer and lyricist, and they're beautiful songs. So I didn't have much to say about the songs at all.
Wow. Okay, Anna. Now, when you're working with the director here and you get to the theater itself, were you there, Rod, when they recorded this?
I was.
So was it like a rehearsal and then record, or was it just record?
We did a run through, the first run through, and we still, I guess, had to capture things to see how things would play back and how they looked and sounded, right, Bryan? Where,
yes.
Yeah,
yes.
So and then we did the real capture. Where, the thing is, we really thought about this for a while, Bryan. You and I troubleshooted. We were trying to figure out what was going to be the most effective way to do this. And then you finally called and said, I know how we're going to do this. And we're going to have to capture live stream. We're going to do 2 cameras. We're going to make it sound and look really good. And then we'll just do a post and it'll be before it airs, and it'll be a live stream, but it'll be captured. So it'll be live in the theater. So we did a run through and then we did the capture, Lorenzo. And it was, I have to tell you, the first one was tough for me, right, Rod? I said, oh my gosh, this felt like so different. Like I was looking at a camera. I'm not looking at an audience. I'm not getting anything back. And I'm giving, but then I have to go from one moment to the next and something else to refer back to what Rod was responding to in terms of directing me. I wrote songs that were all different genres and styles that were supporting all these different aspects of pandemic for me. And so that's where, a lot of the direction came into play of like, even the opening song, I did the pandemic tango and you said, you know what, let's do a Marlene Dietrich take on this. Like it's deadpan and it's like, this. So we had different approaches to each song, going in and out of each thing and then serving the monologues, addressing who I was talking to specifically in that monologue or in that song. And it changes from monologue to monologue. So that's the longest answer for your question of like, we did the run through and then we did the capture, but there was so much to it. And I have to tell you, I really think this is a part of theater forever. For me, it is a hybrid version, right? Everyone's shaking their heads. Yes. And I had to do this. I'm a professor, by the way, voice professor and acting teacher. And I had to embrace this whole medium. And I told my students, you have to be your own producer now. You got to look, sound good, lighting, the sound. You got to deal with technology. This is your theater right here, right? But it really works. There's something really, and it forces you to be a holistic performer and producer and everything, right, Bryan? You're wearing all the hats.
Absolutely. And solo work is always usually self-produced. So it's so great because the truth is when you continue in the business, you understand that there's not a bunch of people doing your work for you. You got to hustle your work. You got to promote your work. You got to produce your own content. And
all of it.
Always teach my students that, work on your own content, work on your own stuff, right? That way you're not waiting for the phone to ring to have someone have a project and so that you can do your work. Solo work is great because you can always be working. And it's for an actor, it's really great because most actors are not writers. And so they really are just waiting to do a play or something. And in the film and television business, you've really got to just be working all the time to try and hustle your work and get more work and stuff. So actors are, for the most part, a lot of times not wanting to produce their own work. It's we're used to just doing the show. And I have found a lot of actors just want to show up and their work is the performance. They don't want to do all the other stuff. But you also find out that when you do solos, you have to do it yourself or it just won't happen. And so I think it's great for an actor to get into that habit so that they can start producing their own content and working, because that's, all the big performers and stuff are all doing that. And they're all creating their own content because it's just the way it is. And the great thing, the reason we can do streaming without licensing issues and stuff is because this is all owner operated content. And so they own the content. It's not published. It's not any of that. And that's when it becomes complicated for unions and licensing and music and all kinds of stuff. But these are personal stories. And so it allows us to be able to stream them and broadcast them. And the performer owns their own content. And we strike up a very fair deal for the artist. It's a very artist friendly deal. And so that if they hustle and they get their people in there, they reap that benefit. And so we had a couple of performers make an enormous amount of money during this. And it was great to see. And I'm talking, 1,000 or 2,000 for one performance after they've done all of their expenses and stuff. And I had a number of performers do that because of the ability to broadcast worldwide. And so that opens up a whole nother stream of revenue for theater if it's done right and well. And that's why it hasn't been.
And I'm assuming social media is a big part of it. Once this is in the can, you're blasting it out there, and it's very easy to click. and get the word out there. So,
but it's also a balance, though, to keep it the privacy strict for the performer, so that they own their content, even though it's their own. You don't want to just put it on YouTube or put it on the internet for people to watch without compensating the artist. I'm a big advocate of compensating artists, and since I am one, so I created a situation so that the audience could support their shows as opposed to themselves, because normally you would have to write a big check to get a theater and rent it out and do it all yourself, and it's an enormous amount of money.
So that begs the question: is your platform, the Whitefire Theater platform, where you're doing these shows online, are they forever on there, or do they drop, or do they rotate, or how does that work?
We just experimented, just started this last year, so we put the ones up that we think are wanting to, and we're creating this library of content for people to watch, and we're getting ready to do more of that. We don't have it on now because we're doing all streaming of solo shows, so to have it streamed for pay-per-view isn't right now the right time. So we pulled that off of the pages right now until we start doing a regular season, which begins again in January, and it's the Whitefire's 40th anniversary season. So we've been preparing for that for quite a while, and we're getting ready to do
January next year, 2022.
2022 is the 40th anniversary of Whitefire. Yes.
Okay.
So we got a whole year already planned and all kinds of stuff. And just real quick, what Anna was talking about earlier, as far as being able to be a part of that, we opened dates for Solo Fest on September 1st. That's when you can apply and submit your proposals and get on the docket for our January Solo Fest. And it's the big anniversary season, and it'll be great. And it's not as big as normal, just because we have about 6 plays that are going to open in March. That'll be running in rep. And that's what came from doing solo work, was being able to produce regular theater also with that way, because we realized that one night of 60 people was better than 3 nights of 20 for a lot of reasons. And money and cost, and of course the morale of the cast and all that kind of stuff. So after the recession, we had to shift the way we produce stuff. And I came up with this idea of vertical rep, multiple shows in the same week running vertical. So you just run 6 Fridays, another show runs 6 Saturdays. And what would it take to do that? And so we needed more dimmers, and we needed a lot of different technology, but the technology for production or projections was just starting to really hit its stride. And it's not a substitute for set pieces.
By projections, for the audience who doesn't know, these are basically slides or images that are literally projected behind the performers.
Or video, yes. And Broadway is using it a lot because it's really a cost-effective way. But it's not just a substitute for a set. It's color or texture, metaphor, things like that. And that's really the art form of projections for theater, I think. And so that opens up kind of a whole another can of worms.
I remember one of your projections was a brick wall, and then you turned it off, and I'm like, wait a minute. Oh, that was all projection. Very cool. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I want to ask Rod a quick question here. If there was, and I'll ask all of you, I want to hear your honest answers, of course. What do you think in terms of this production? Where do we go from here as far as Anna's piece? Rod, where do you think it was the most difficult, or the most difficult thing to overcome in getting that final product out there for you?
I don't think there was any single thing that was difficult. We were just intent upon realizing it. And we did one step at a time. As I always like to say to people who are trying to do difficult things, there are no big problems. There's just the thing you have to solve right now, and then there's the thing you have to solve after that. Don't think of a problem as big. Just figure out how to fix this bit, how to get over this bit. So there was nothing that I ever felt was insurmountable. We had a very powerful intention to manifest it. We had people all around us helping to manifest it, and it was manifest.
Mm-hmm. Wow. How about Anna? What do you think? Anything that?
The hardest thing, is because we are wearing all the hats as the solo performer to, what we do. is then just turning those off and just being the performer and just being so ultra focused on that. Um, that was hard at that point where I was aware of all these other elements that I hadn't been used to, even though I've worked in front of cameras and all that, but it was combining all those elements together. And also, these shows are, cutting it down to 1 hour was brutal for me. I mean, I had written so much that, hundreds and hundreds of hours of stuff that I had to really narrow down to just a 60 or 70 minute. We did a 60-minute format, I believe, because that's like what it is for online, for people's attention. It's like the optimal. And memorizing, like all that stuff, being off book, that was really challenging during the quarantine for me. And being, off book, I relied on some stuff where I had to look at some notes here and there because I had to, because we were going back and forth between things. But it's the hardest thing I have ever done is solo shows. I've done everything, touring, playing, performing, Broadway, off Broadway, TV, film. This solo show genre is the most challenging of all.
I think so too.
Wow. What is that?
And most fulfilling, as you said, Rod. Most fulfilling, transformative. Yes.
Right. And the music element, does it add to the difficulty?
Oh, it's so much fun. Like, I can't tell you how it's so all encompassing for me. This is where I feel that I am me completely because I get to play, sing, act, write, do all the things that I do in one setting. So I get to fulfill all my creative needs and my potential there, and then also, letting it go in terms of like, when is it done really? Because it's always changing, the piece. So also when Rod and I said, okay, we got to stop there, finessing and massaging it. This has got to be to go to the next point, to lead it to the whole arc works, So, yeah.
Well, I want to say this also about the piece, though. The fact that it has so much music in it, and it's essentially what is it? It's a song cycle, or it's a book musical,
or it's a cabaret song cycle. I say,
a cabaret song cycle. So, that we talk about solo show as a category. That's one thing, which typically does not include somebody who's a very skilled musician and songwriter, and so this category is even less populated than any other. And the genre itself is actually so unique unto itself. It's a bit like the difference between seeing a straight play and seeing a Broadway musical. They're quite different creatures. And the skill set required to pull that off is very rare in one person.
Wow.
Thank you, Rob.
So Bryan, how about you?
Well, I also think when you combine a solo work with music, I mean, it takes you to a whole nother level of skills just because it's, some of our greatest artists in music, Paul Simon, Sting, those guys are all trying to write musicals and finding it nearly impossible to do it well. And, if they're having a difficult time with it, it's tough. And the challenge is huge. And I think this is a great example of how it works really well. And the intimacy of this particular show was really compelling because of what we were all going through at the same time. And what she dealt with, that's the artist. I mean, that's, we're supposed to be illuminating the human condition. And this was happening in real time as we were doing it. And we were all very connected to it because we all were feeling what we were feeling, having to go through this and not being able to be with each other. We were very lucky in that we were the only theater in the entire United States that was still able to do work. So it kept me focused and had purpose in a time where it was difficult not to drop into depression and addiction and all kinds of stuff that you can do with this kind of thing. So I am a huge admirer of solo work. And that's why I'm, creating the platform that we are at the White Fire and able to do as much as possible with it. So
right, and you mentioned a lot of musical artists. Billy Joel, Elton John, Cyndi Lauper have all dived into the theatrical musical realm.
Yes.
Mainly though not promoting, but using their songs as story arcs to tell stories to books about. But okay, what about you, Bryan? What was the most difficult thing for you or challenging thing regarding this particular production?
Well, I think we started at the beginning about that, which is the idea of it being music. So to record it and have it as high quality as possible is an area that I'm not skilled in necessarily. I mean, I'm not a musician, but I am, done musicals and, all that kind of stuff, but I'm
Did
not
you record?
technically.
Did you record in stereo or no?
I've recorded in stereo?
Yes.
Yeah, we sure did, because we have a really good sound system with the Whitefire that, we can do that with. And, she had her microphone right there, and we also were recording from another mic and stuff. So, we were trying to capture it as well as possible. And that's I think, really the challenge. And then, of course, lighting it. And then you've got a kind of a shiny surface, the black surface at the top of the piano that's reflecting lights. And so, it's all that kind of stuff that is not something I'm necessarily comfortable with, because I'm not a tech. But I'm a director and an artist of theater. And so I'm always open to try and figure out a way, as Rod so eloquently said, to find solutions to the problems right then, and then move on to the next one. Because if you think about the size of it, it can be overwhelming. And, we just trusted. I knew that we all had really great talent in the room, and that collaboration at that level is probably some of the most gratifying moments you can have as an artist. When I want to work with someone, I want someone as good or better than me, that I'm opposite. I want that. I don't want to shine as the star of the production and outdo everybody else. I want to play with the Lakers when I'm on stage. And that's what we were doing. These guys are all at the top of their game. And so it's exciting, inspiring, and as you said, transformational. It transformed my perspective on a lot of the stuff. Whitefire has developed a lot of musicals in the past, and we're getting ready to do some more here coming up. And it's a very difficult art form. So I'm always in awe of someone like Anna that can create that kind of musical world. And
right. I was just going to say that. I said, there's a little tiny element here that we're kind of skirting around a little bit, but you got to have that talent. And Anna, and obviously clearly Rod, and in terms of the team that you've created for this show, it's clear that I'm assuming you had fun doing it, minus all the difficulties. And it's something that, like I said earlier, people can come back to. They're going to remember 2020, and this is one of the things that might make you smile while you remember it, because we were all sitting there singing the same songs in our head, especially Zoom, Zoom, Zoom. Anyway, so in terms of before we say goodbye to all our viewers, any other words of wisdom or advice you want to give to actors, directors, producers, theater owners?
Well, the Black Voices Festival is actually getting ready to take submissions here, I think tomorrow. So that opens in first week in September. So we'll be doing that. So if there's Black artists out there, just go to whitefiretheater.com. That's theater with an R-E. And, you'll be able to get information and apply and do all that stuff, and hopefully be a part
of that process. Are they auditioning for you or submitting the work?
They submit the work, they submit clips, and I've done it enough so I can tell whether they're, what the level is just off of what they're describing, and then seeing their clips and all that kind of stuff. And then we approve the ones that we think are good and want to produce and put up. And, we say produce, but for me, it's really curating, because we're bringing in these artists and creating space, of course, but it's the artists themselves that are really producing their own work. They're promoting it, they're hustling it. And so, that's where the real respect comes in, is because these actors are not only doing the most difficult thing artistically, which is, performing an hour and a half solo show, but they're producing it and hustling it as well. So it's a formidable task for sure. And we try and give as much support as you can, but it's really up to the performer to do the work, and some more than others. And so it's just a matter of how they get their work accomplished, and then of course promoted and produced. So that's really, I think, the structure of solo work in general. It's a self-produced type of medium for sure.
Absolutely. Rod, how about you? Any words of wisdom or future projects you want to share?
Well, I would say if you have a story to tell, you'd better start working on how to tell it. and don't let it go. Don't carry it to the grave. It's not going to be any value to anybody at that point, least of all to you. So if you have a story, get working on it. And if you want some inspiration, take a look at Anna Guigui's show, and you'll see something pretty exceptional that might inspire you to tell your own story.
Yeah.
Very cool. Anna, this is
Oh,
your
you're
show.
so sweet.
What would you tell us?
Thank you. So I would say, first of all, write down your story. Tell your personal story. It's really important. And as we've all touched on, it's very transformative work once it's witnessed by other people. But really important to share our personal stories with other people, because bottom line is we are all human and we all empathize with each other. And even if we have not gone through the exact situation that you have, we can empathize and relate to it on some level. So yes, if I can shamelessly promote and piggyback on Bryan's philosophy of one-person showkeeper wearing all the hats, you have nominated my show for Best of Fest. It's one of many, but Sunday, June 27 at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a 60-minute show. Please go to whitefiretheaterre.com to get your tickets. It's a live stream performance. It'll be aired again. Please come and tell your friends about it. And it's a super fun hour. It's a moving, emotional hour too. It's touching on many subjects that have to do with the pandemic. But I would appreciate your support tremendously. And thank you, Rod, for being a part of that process. And thank you, Bryan, for making it all possible. I don't know how to thank you as an artist, as a human being, as a person. Just to be able to express myself during quarantine and to have been able to perform in a theater was a priceless experience for me. And just thank you, Bryan, for doing that for all of us.
Wow.
And for audiences, because I think people really got a lot from all the performances that you have produced at the Whitefire over the years, but especially this year. Thank you for putting yourself out there. And I know that it takes a lot, not just financially, but spiritually and emotionally. And I know how committed you are to doing what you do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, you're keeping
And
theater
thank you,
alive.
Lorenzo, thank you for promoting us. You are the best.
No, this is fun for me. I love, my thing is I like to let the world know, people know, viewers, young actors, young directors, whatever. It takes a team, it takes a group of people to make something as wonderful as this. And as you can tell, it's a love fest. It's, you may meet a person for the first time, but after working with them, they become family. And I've experienced theater productions myself where I was either a cast member or crew, and the show ends, and you're like, oh, you just created this family for so many months, and it's like it's over. But clearly, this is here. Great, and give a plug one more time. When is it?
It's Where Do We Go From Here? Part of Best of Fest, the Whitefire Theater. Go to the whitefiretheater.com, re.com for tickets. It's Sunday, June 27 at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And tickets are $15, Bryan, I believe.
$15.99.
$15.99. And the if you can't see it on that time and day, the virtual live stream is good for 48 hours. So you can watch it after the fact for 48 hours after it airs.
Yes.
Oh, so it cuts off after 48 hours?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So the link will be available for 48 hours after that.
Very cool. So make sure you watch it. I can't thank you all enough. This was an amazing show this time. I love doing these making ofs. If you've caught any of them, obviously it's people who like to work together and put out such a wonderful product. Bryan, Rod, Anna, it's again, two of you I have seen before, wherever you are on your screen. Rod, it was a pleasure to meet you, and obviously
Likewise.
you're part of this talented group here. So everybody watching, again, check out the show. And before we say goodbye, I got to do my thing. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, if I can say it, subscribe button, as well as the little bell, you can join in and see when I do drop videos everywhere. But real quick, I've got a couple other shows that I think you should check out. One is the Geek Authority Show. That's where I interviewed Anna and Bryan. individually and talked about their careers and their backgrounds and so on and so forth. I have TGA's Mysterious Chamber of Collectibles. It's where I collect things from my past, get to show them to you. Some things are really cool. I also have Unboxing the Geek Authority, where I get new items, brand new, sent from the manufacturers, open them up right in front of you, and I get kind of geeky. Surprise. I also have a show called Reviews, Opinions, and Commentary, where I talk about various subject matters, and feelings and opinions on things. There's also my Talk About show, where I gather family and friends. We talk about various TV shows, from Space 1999 with Martin Landau and Barbara Bain, all the way through to Cobra Kai, the new series on Netflix. Of course, there's this show, Making Entertainment, which I appreciate you watching. And I have my number 7 show, which is brand new, just started a few weeks ago, called Playing Games with the Geek Authority, where I play, well, actually a bunch of us play games from beginning to end, one game, and you get to learn the rules, regulations, and problems, and so on and so forth. So, and consideration if you might want to get these things. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Anna and Bryan and Rod. This has been so exciting and so much fun. We hope you enjoyed the show. And, of course, let's say goodbye, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Mwah. Virtual hugs.